You ever notice how some people just know how to get under your skin? They push the same button over and over, and it's almost like they're watching to see when you'll snap. And you tell yourself, I'm not gonna let them get to me this time. But before you know it, you're in the same argument, saying the same things, feeling the same regret afterwards. That's the trap. And here's the hard truth. Difficult people don't always change, but how you show up around them can. The moment you stop meeting them where they're dragging you and start meeting them on your level, that's when you take back the power they've been feeding on, not with a fight, not with proving a point, but with the quiet confidence that they can't touch. Some of the hardest battles we fight aren't loud. They happen in quiet moments, after a conversation that left you drained, or a family dinner where you smiled through clenched teeth. You replay their words in your head, wondering if you should have said more or less or nothing at all. Difficult people have a way of making you doubt yourself, like you're always one step behind in a game you never wanted to play. And if you're not careful, you start to lose track of where they end and you begin. Today isn't about fixing them. It's about finding your footing, learning how to meet them without losing yourself, and keeping your peace no matter how hard they try to pull you out of it. When someone knows how to use their words like weapons, it's not always the shouting or the obvious insults that do the most damage. It's the subtle comments, the little digs, the carefully placed tone that leaves you wondering if you're overreacting. Maybe it's a coworker who knows exactly how to frame something so you look like the problem, or a family member who hides their criticism inside a joke. And before you realize it, your mind has already taken the bait. You're replaying what they said over and over, trying to decide if you should defend yourself, confront them, or just let it go. That's how they hook you, not with their volume, but with their ability to get you to carry their words long after they've walked away. The truth is, you can't stop people from saying hurtful things. You can't make someone filter their words the way you wish they would. But you can decide what happens inside you after you hear them. This isn't about pretending their words don't matter or forcing yourself to. Just ignore it. It's about learning the difference between something that's worth holding onto and something that's worth setting down immediately. If you keep every single word they throw at you, your mind becomes a storage unit for someone else's issues. And every time you go back to replay those moments, you're paying rent on a space you don't even own. There's a power in creating a pause between what they say and how you respond, not just out loud, but in your own head. That pause is where you get to ask yourself, is this about me, or is this about them? Because more often than not, their words reveal more about their frustrations, their fears, and their own lack of control than they do about your character. But when you don't pause, you take ownership of their mess. You let it move into your space, rearrange your emotions, and decide how your day is going to go. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do in the face of cutting words is to quietly refuse the delivery. You don't have to sign for every package that shows up at your door. You can hear what's said, recognize the intention behind it, and choose not to let it shape your reality. This doesn't mean you won't feel the sting. You're human, and words have weight. It means you decide how long that weight stays in your hands. Keeping your peace isn't about avoiding hard conversations or silencing your voice. It's about making sure the only voice that gets the final say in your head is your own, steady, grounded, and clear. The more you protect that space, the more you realize that peace isn't something someone can take from you without your permission. And once you start living like that, their words might still reach your ears, but they'll stop reaching your core. A lot of people hear the word boundaries and think it means building a wall so high no one can get close. But boundaries aren't about keeping people out, they're about keeping yourself intact. The challenge is, not everyone will like it when you start holding them, especially the people who've gotten used to you saying yes when you meant no, or staying silent when something crossed the line. The first time you enforce a boundary, it can feel like you're lighting a match in a room full of gasoline. Suddenly, there's tension, pushback, and maybe even accusations that you're being cold, selfish, or different. And if you've always been the peacemaker, that reaction can make you want to back down just to keep things calm. But here's the truth. A healthy boundary is never about starting a war. It's about making sure you're not at war with yourself. When you constantly bend past your own limits to keep the peace, you're not really keeping peace, you're just delaying conflict, and the one who ends up carrying the weight is you. Over time, that weight shows up as resentment, exhaustion, and a version of yourself you barely recognize. Holding boundaries means deciding that you're not going to trade your well-being for temporary comfort. The tricky part is how you deliver them. Boundaries shouted in anger can sound like weapons, but boundaries spoken with calm clarity are more like a compass. They tell people where you stand without tearing them down. Instead of, "You always take advantage of me," it can sound like, "I'm not able to do that for you." Instead of, "Stop talking to me like that," it can be, "I'm going to step away from this conversation if it keeps going in this direction." The words matter, but the tone matters even more. Calm doesn't mean weak. Calm means steady enough not to match their storm. You'll find that some people will respect your boundary right away, while others will test it over and over. And every test is an opportunity to either reinforce it or let it crumble. That's why consistency is key. Not to punish them, but to prove to yourself that your limits are worth holding. It's not about controlling their behavior, it's about managing yours. You're not in charge of whether they accept your boundary. You're in charge of whether you keep it. It's also worth remembering that boundaries aren't a one-time announcement, they're a way of living. The more you practice, the less defensive you'll feel when someone challenges you, and the more natural it becomes to stand your ground without raising your voice. You can disagree without disrespect. You can say no without guilt. You can walk away without slamming the door. And maybe the most freeing part is this: you don't need someone else's permission to protect your own space. You can love people, care for them, and still have limits. Boundaries don't mean you're shutting them out. They mean you're letting them in without losing yourself. And when you hold them with both strength and kindness, you'll find that peace doesn't come from avoiding conflict. It comes from knowing you can face it without falling apart. When someone twists the truth, it can feel like the ground shifts right under your feet. You know what happened. You know what was said. But somehow, by the time they're done talking, the story doesn't look anything like reality. They leave out details, add in things you never said, or frame the situation in a way that makes you look unreasonable. And if they're good at it, if they've had years of practice, they can make other people believe it too. That's not just frustrating, it's disorienting. You start wondering if you even remember things correctly, and that self-doubt is exactly what they're hoping for. Because the more confused you are, the more control they have. The hard truth is you can't stop someone from twisting the story to serve themselves. You can't make them tell it straight if they don't want to. But you can anchor yourself to what you know is true. That starts with slowing down before you react. When you're hurt or angry, the temptation is to fight their version with every ounce of energy you've got, to correct the record, to defend yourself, to make sure everyone sees the truth. But here's the problem: when you get pulled into proving yourself over and over, you've already stepped onto their playing field, and on their field, they control the rules. Instead, think of truth like a weight you keep in your own hands. You don't need to throw it at anyone, but you also don't let it go. You hold it steady, even when someone's trying to yank it away. Sometimes that means quietly documenting what happened so you don't second-guess yourself later. Sometimes it means repeating your version once, calmly, clearly, and then letting it stand even if they keep talking. And sometimes it means refusing to be dragged into another exhausting back and forth where you know they're not listening anyway. It's not easy to walk away when someone is painting you in a way that feels unfair. Every part of you wants to set the record straight, especially if other people are watching. But here's what I've learned: people who truly know you will see through the distortions, and the ones who are determined to believe the twisted version. You can't argue them out of it. The energy you spend trying could be used to keep yourself grounded instead of getting tangled in their narrative. Holding your ground doesn't mean being passive. It means staying anchored in calm, clear self-respect. You speak your truth once, and you live in a way that backs it up every day. Over time, Consistency speaks louder than any defense you could give in the moment. And when you stop chasing the need to convince them, you get something far more valuable than winning an argument. You get your peace back. The reality is, people can twist words, but they can't twist your integrity unless you hand it to them. The more you know who you are, and the more you trust what's real, the less power their version of the story will have over you. And that's when their games stop feeling like quicksand and start feeling like background noise you no longer have to step into. Some people know exactly where your buttons are, and they've learned how to push them in just the right way to get a reaction. Maybe it's a certain tone they use, or the way they bring up something you've told them in confidence. Maybe it's a look, a smirk, or that little pause before they say something they know will set you off. And when it happens, it's almost like your body reacts before your mind catches up. Your chest tightens, your voice sharpens, and you feel yourself stepping right into the trap you promised yourself you'd avoid. That's what button pushing is designed to do, pull you out of your calm and into their chaos. The hard part is, you can't make someone stop pushing your buttons. You can't rewire their behavior, but you can rewire your response. And that starts with remembering that calm is not weakness, it's strategy. When you stay calm, you're not ignoring what they're doing, you're refusing to give them the payoff they're looking for. Most button pushers aren't interested in solutions. They're looking for control. They want to see you flustered, defensive, maybe even apologizing for things you didn't do. The more reactive you are, the more control they have. Calm isn't something you magically find in the heat of the moment. It's something you prepare for before you even step into the room. That might mean knowing your triggers well enough to spot them early, or having a mental phrase you repeat to keep your focus when the pressure rises. Something simple like, stay steady, or not my storm. It might mean physically slowing down your breathing so your body doesn't hijack your mind. Because the calmer you are on the inside, the clearer you can think about what's really going on. Sometimes staying calm is as simple as creating space. That might be stepping out of the room, taking a pause before you respond, or telling them, I'm not going to talk about this right now. Space isn't retreat, it's protection. It gives you the chance to respond from choice instead of reflex. And over time, it teaches the other person that you're not available for the same old emotional tug of war. You'll notice that the more you practice this, the more they may try to push harder at first. That's normal. They're testing to see if the old version of you is still there, the one who jumped into every fight, took every bait, and felt the need to prove your point in the moment. But if you stay consistent, they start to realize that the buttons don't work anymore. And that shift changes the whole dynamic. At the end of the day, staying calm when they push every button isn't about controlling them. It's about controlling what you let inside your head and heart. You can acknowledge the provocation without stepping into it. You can see the bait without biting. And when you do, you start to discover a new kind of strength, the kind that doesn't just keep the peace in the moment, but keeps you from losing yourself in someone else's chaos. Resistance has a way of showing up when you're trying to make a change, whether that change is in a relationship, at work, or in the way you take care of yourself. Sometimes it's loud and obvious, like someone arguing with you or flat out refusing to cooperate. Other times it's subtle, like quiet dismissals, passive, aggressive comments, or that feeling you get when someone's body language tells you they're not on board. And if you're not careful, that resistance can pull you right into old patterns, explaining yourself too much, backing down to keep the peace, or overcompensating just to prove your point. That's how you start losing yourself without even realizing it. The tricky thing about resistance is that it often triggers something deep in us, maybe a fear of being misunderstood, rejected, or seen as difficult. When that fear takes over, we can end up trading our boundaries, values, or self-respect for the temporary relief of making the other person more comfortable. But the cost is high. Every time you shrink yourself to avoid conflict, you chip away at your own sense of worth. And the truth is, resistance from others doesn't always mean you're doing something wrong. Sometimes it means you're finally doing something different, something they're not used to. Meeting resistance without losing yourself starts with staying rooted in your why. Why are you making this choice? Why is this boundary important? Why is this change worth holding on to? When you know your why, you're less likely to get swept up in their how. How they react, how they try to convince you otherwise, how they make you feel for not going along. Your reason becomes your anchor, keeping you steady no matter how choppy the waters get. It also means understanding the difference between hearing someone and absorbing them. You can listen to their concerns without taking their resistance as truth. You can acknowledge their perspective without abandoning your own. This is where emotional boundaries become just as important as practical ones. It's telling yourself their reaction belongs to them. My choice belongs to me. That separation protects you from carrying emotional weight that isn't yours to hold. Sometimes the best way to handle resistance is to slow the pace. You don't have to respond in the heat of the moment. You can take time to think, to breathe, to choose words that align with your values instead of words that match their intensity. This isn't about winning an argument or forcing agreement. It's about showing up in a way you can live with after the conversation is over. And yes, there will be moments when resistance doesn't fade, no matter how calm or clear you are. That's when you have to decide if their approval is worth more than your self-respect. Because holding on to yourself in the face of pushback isn't just about that one conversation. It's about building a pattern of self-trust. The more you choose to stand in your own truth, the more you realize that meeting resistance doesn't have to mean losing ground. You can face it head on, stay steady, and walk away knowing you didn't trade who you are just to make someone else comfortable. One of the most frustrating things in any relationship is giving respect and not getting it back. You try to speak with patience, you listen when they talk, you give them the benefit of the doubt, and in return, you get dismissive comments, interruptions, or behavior that crosses lines you thought were clear. Over time, that imbalance starts to wear on you. You start asking yourself, am I too nice? Am I letting them walk over me? And sometimes, without even realizing it, you begin to match their energy, raising your voice because they raise theirs, cutting them off because they cut you off. That's how you lose your center. And the hardest part, it's easy to believe that matching disrespect is the only way to protect yourself. The truth is, you can't force someone to respect you. Respect is a choice, and if they're not choosing it, that says more about them than it does about you. What you can control is how you respond when that respect is missing. And that starts with defining your own standard, not for them, but for yourself. How do you want to carry yourself when things get tense? How do you want to speak when you're upset? If you wait to answer those questions until you're in the middle of a heated moment, you'll default to whatever reaction feels most defensive. But if you decide ahead of time, you can respond from a place of strength instead of impulse. Sometimes that strength looks like calmly naming the behavior in the moment. I'm not okay with being spoken to like that, and then redirecting or stepping away. Sometimes it looks like adjusting how much access they have to you, not out of revenge, but to protect your own well-being. And sometimes it's simply refusing to match their tone, even when it feels unfair. That's not weakness, that's discipline. It's saying, I'm not going to let you decide the kind of person I am. It's also important to separate hurt from identity. When someone disrespects you, it's natural to feel hurt, but that hurt doesn't define your worth. Too often, we tie our sense of value to how others treat us, forgetting that their behavior is a reflection of their character, not ours. If you make their level of respect the measure of your self-worth, you'll always be at the mercy of their moods, opinions, and limitations. Over time, you'll learn that returning respect, even when it's not given, is not about excusing their behavior. It's about preserving your own integrity. You can set boundaries, you can limit contact, you can speak firmly, all without becoming what you're standing against, because the goal isn't just to be respected by others. It's to be able to look in the mirror and respect yourself for how you handled it. And that's the shift, realizing that respect is something you hold, not something they give. The less you hinge it on their behavior, the more freedom you have to protect your peace, keep your standards, and walk away from situations where your worth is not being honored. That's not giving up. That's standing up for yourself. When someone in your life lives in a constant state of chaos, It's easy to get pulled right into it without even realizing. Their emotions swing fast, their reactions come sharp, and their problems seem to spill into every conversation. One minute they're fine, the next they're upset, and you're left trying to figure out what you missed or what you did wrong. The truth is, their storm doesn't always have anything to do with you. But if you're not careful, you can end up feeling like it's your responsibility to calm it down, fix it, or match it. That's how you start living at the mercy of someone else's weather. The first step to staying steady is recognizing that their storm belongs to them. You didn't cause it, and you can't control it, but you can decide how close you stand to it and how much of it you let inside. This doesn't mean shutting yourself off or refusing to care. It means creating enough space, mentally and emotionally, to see their behavior for what it is without letting it take over your own state of mind. That space is what allows you to respond instead of react. When the other person is heightened, everything in you might want to match their energy, to get louder if they're loud, to rush if they're frantic, to defend yourself if they're throwing accusations. But here's the thing, storms feed off storms. If you add more wind, it only gets stronger. Calm isn't just a nice idea here, it's an active choice. Sometimes that means slowing your voice even when theirs is speeding up. Sometimes it means literally grounding yourself, feeling your feet on the floor, taking a steady breath, and reminding yourself, this isn't mine to carry. You might also notice that storms often come with emotional bait. Things said to provoke you, pull you off balance, or get you to engage on their terms. Staying steady means seeing the bait without biting. You don't have to correct every exaggeration, answer every accusation, or respond to every spike in emotion. You can acknowledge what they're feeling without signing on to the chaos. Phrases like, I hear you, or let's talk when things are calmer, can be a way of holding your ground without escalating. It's worth remembering that some people are so used to living in the storm that calm feels foreign to them. When you don't join in, they may push harder at first, trying to get the reaction they expect. This is where your consistency matters most, if you can keep showing up with the same steady presence. Clear, firm, but not combative, you start to shift the pattern, not because you've changed them, but because you've stopped letting their storm decide your temperature. And here's the deeper truth, your steadiness isn't just for them, it's for you. It's what keeps you from saying things you'll regret, making decisions you don't believe in, or carrying emotions that were never yours to hold. Their weather might be unpredictable, but you can be the constant in your own life, a grounded place to stand no matter how hard the wind blows. Manipulation rarely shows up wearing a big, obvious sign. Most of the time it's subtle. It hides in half-truths, guilt trips, and carefully chosen words that leave you feeling responsible for things you didn't actually do. It can sound like, after everything I've done for you, or I guess I just can't count on you. Sometimes it's framed as concern, sometimes as disappointment, and sometimes it's so wrapped in charm that you don't realize what's happening until later. When you're wondering why you agreed to something you didn't want, or why you feel guilty for saying no, that's the power of manipulation. It bends the situation until you doubt your own perspective. The hardest part is that manipulation often comes from people you care about. Family, friends, coworkers, even a partner. You want to believe the best about them, so you give them the benefit of the doubt. And manipulators count on that. They rely on your empathy, your patience, and your desire to keep the peace. That's what makes it so easy to get hooked. If you're not aware of what's happening, you end up playing along without realizing you've stepped into their game. Handling manipulation without playing along starts with learning to spot it in real time. That means paying attention not just to what they say, but to how you feel right after they say it. Do you feel pressured, cornered, or like you owe them something you didn't agree to? Do you feel like the conversation is less about understanding and more about getting you to a yes at any cost? Those feelings are signals. They're telling you to pause before you act. That pause is your greatest tool. It's what keeps you from reacting in the moment and committing to something you'll regret. You can say, I need to think about that, or I'll get back to you. If they push for an immediate answer, that's another red flag. Urgency is one of manipulation's favorite tactics. Stepping back gives you the space to decide based on your values, not their pressure. It also helps to separate the emotion from the request. Manipulation works best when you make decisions based on guilt, fear, or obligation. If you strip away the emotional layer, you can look at the actual ask, is this something I want to do? Is this something I'm responsible for? If the answer is no, you can decline without over-explaining. The less you justify, the less material they have to twist. You might feel a pull to defend yourself or prove you're a good person, but here's the truth: you don't owe a manipulator proof of your intentions. You owe yourself the right to act with clarity. Sometimes that means repeating your answer calmly, even if they circle back with another angle. Sometimes it means limiting the topics you discuss with them or how much personal information you share. In the end, not playing along isn't about outsmarting them. It's about refusing to abandon your own judgment. When you hold that line, calmly, consistently, you take away the one thing manipulation needs to work: your participation. And that's how you keep both your decision and your dignity intact. Some people can walk into a room and leave you feeling lighter, more grounded, more at peace. Others can leave you feeling like the air just got pulled out of your lungs. They don't always mean to, though sometimes they do, but their constant negativity, demands, or drama can take more out of you than you realize. It's not always about what they say. It's the weight of being around someone who's always in crisis mode, always needing something, always pulling the conversation and the mood toward what's heavy. And if you care about them, it's even harder. You want to help. You want to be there. But over time, if you're not careful, you start to notice you've got nothing left for yourself. The first step in protecting your energy is giving yourself permission to do it in the first place. A lot of us feel guilty for creating space from people who drain us, especially if they're family or close friends. We tell ourselves we're being selfish or unkind, but there's a difference between abandoning someone and refusing to be their emotional dumping ground. You can care deeply and still recognize when the balance in the relationship has tipped so far that you're running on empty. Protecting your energy doesn't always mean cutting someone off completely. Sometimes it means setting limits on how much time you spend with them or how often you engage in certain conversations. If every call turns into an hour-long vent session, maybe you keep the conversation short or you gently steer it toward lighter topics. If every in-person meeting ends with you feeling emotionally wrung out, maybe you space those visits farther apart. Boundaries like these aren't punishments. They're guardrails to keep you from sliding into burnout. It also means paying attention to the moments right after you interact with them. Do you feel tense, heavy, or exhausted? That's your body telling you something your mind might be trying to talk you out of. Those feelings aren't weakness. They're signals. They let you know when you've given more than you could afford in that moment. And once you start noticing those patterns, you can plan ahead to protect yourself instead of repairing yourself afterward. Sometimes the hardest part is not engaging in every emotional pull. If someone is constantly upset, frustrated, or in conflict, you don't have to match their energy or fix their situation every time. You can listen without absorbing. You can empathize without taking on the responsibility to solve it. A simple, "I'm sorry you're going through that," can be enough. You're acknowledging their feelings without stepping so far in that you lose your own balance. And maybe the most important piece is making sure you refill what gets drained. Protecting your energy isn't just about creating space from what drains you. It's about filling that space with what restores you. That could be time with people who lift you up, quiet moments alone, movement, faith, hobbies, or anything that reminds you who you are when you're not carrying someone else's weight. Because at the end of the day, your energy is what allows you to show up well for yourself and for others. If you let it run out, you're no good to anyone. But if you guard it, nurture it, and spend it wisely, you'll find that you can love people deeply without letting their storm drain the light out of yours. There are some people who thrive on confusion, not because they necessarily wake up wanting to create trouble, but because uncertainty gives them power. If the conversation is unclear, it can twist it later. If the facts are murky, they can deny, deflect, or shift blame. And when emotions get stirred up enough, it's easier for them to hide in the noise. This is why some interactions feel like you've just stepped into a fog. You can't see the next step. You can't remember exactly where you started. And suddenly you're arguing about things you didn't even mean to bring up. That's not by accident. Chaos benefits the person who doesn't want accountability. Responding with clarity in those moments is about resisting the urge to match their energy. It's tempting to get louder, faster, more reactive, thinking if you push hard enough, they'll finally see your point. But that's exactly what the chaos invites. The more you match it, the more you're playing their game. Clarity is not about winning the moment, it's about refusing to get lost in it. It's deciding you will only say what is true, only as much as needs to be said, and then stop. Not because you're weak, but because you're focused. Clarity starts before the conversation even begins. If you know you're dealing with someone who thrives on disorder, go in knowing exactly what your point is. 1 point, not 5, not 15. Just one. Write it down if you have to. If the talk starts drifting, gently but firmly bring it back. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about this. Every time you do that, you take the steering wheel back. It also means using language that leaves little room for twisting. Be specific. Instead of, "You always make me feel ignored," say, "Yesterday, when I was talking about work, you looked at your phone the whole time." That's a fact. Facts are harder to argue with, harder to spin into something else. Chaos feeds on generalizations and emotional exaggerations because they're easy to dispute. Specifics shut down that door. There's also a choice to make about pace. Chaos wants speed. It wants quick reactions, interrupted sentences, heated back and forths. Clarity slows things down. Take pauses. Breathe before you respond. If you need time to think, say, "Sewed, I'm going to take a minute before I answer that." It's not weakness, it's control. You're showing that you won't be rushed into saying something you didn't mean just because they're trying to stir urgency. And maybe the hardest part, clarity sometimes means ending the conversation before they're ready. Not slamming the door, not storming out, but calmly saying, "This isn't productive right now. We can talk when it's calmer." That's not avoidance, that's wisdom. You're recognizing that nothing good grows in chaos, and you're not obligated to stand in the storm just because someone else brought it. When you respond with clarity instead of chaos, you remove the fog they rely on. You make the conversation about the truth, not the noise. And in doing so, you protect your own peace, because sometimes the most powerful thing you can bring to a messy situation is a steady, focused voice that refuses to get lost in the confusion.